say we do go into a crisis, which I do think is a possibility down the line, and I don't think it's too far away. And there's a number of scenarios I see when that happens. One is called the bail-in, and this is where there is a requirement by the government that some of your money in the bank is lent to the government against your wishes. You're basically told, everybody who's got more than 10,000 lends the excess to the government, depending on whether you're a company or a person. There's some rules, but everyone lends the excess to the government, and you're lending it to us for 30 years at 0.5%. So it sounds like an asset, but actually it's pretty worthless. That's a bail-in. The other possibility actually is if and when we get to the digital currency stage, and I'm talking here central bank digital currencies, which I think is coming. When we have central bank digital currencies, to all intents and purposes, we now have two types of money circulating and exchangeable one for one. So you have the money which has been created by the system, by the banks, which is circulating, and in the early stages, for the first few years, you could change your money one for one for the central bank digital currency, which is the liability of the central bank. And then along comes this crisis, and suddenly they say, because we're in a crisis and the shops are all empty of all the stuff that people need, and it doesn't matter what the crisis is, it could be a war, it could be civil unrest, it could be a natural disaster. Because of the crisis, we're going to impose restrictions on what people can buy. So the only way you can spend your money is via the central bank digital currency, and there'll be limitations on how much you can put into the CBDC for the purposes of A, B, C, and D, and anything in excess will need permission, or it's postponed, or it's delayed, or it's temporary. You can't move the rest of your money into the CBDC, so you can't do anything except what you've got in the CBDC wallet. And that effectively then creates us a system where we have two currencies. The old currency, which the government has its liabilities in, and an Apple bond is in the old currency. A treasury bond is in the old currency. And we have the new currency, the CBDC, but you can't, as your bond matures, you can't take your bond and move it to your CBDC wallet because of the restrictions, the capital controls on doing this. And now we've got this dual system where the old currency is definitely not worth as much as the new currency. All you've got is a hope that these rules will be lifted and you'll be able to change your old currency into the new currency, because there'll certainly be a promise that you'll be able to do so in the future when the crisis is over. But that moment might never come, in which case your old currency becomes effectively a defunct currency. The government doesn't default on the old currency because it can still keep paying in what is now effectively worthless paper, but that worthless paper can't affect the economy because you're not allowed to spend it. So the government effectively has changed its system through the back door without defaulting into a system where it's got a new currency operating, and it can now borrow in the new currency with a debt to GDP ratio in the new currency starting off at zero, and they'll have lots of leeway to reimburse all the pension funds, the domestic pension funds, not the foreign ones. They'll be able to reimburse all the domestic pension funds which are invested in government bonds to some extent. They'll be able to reimburse all kinds of situations. They'll be able to bring in a universal basic income, but their debt to GDP ratio won't rise very much at all. It'd be way below the 100% that they got now with the old currency. So they're leaving behind the old debt and starting afresh, reimbursing who they think deserves to be reimbursed. But the vast majority of holders of dollars, and it could be euros or pounds or New Zealand dollars or Australian dollars, doesn't matter where you are, the vast majority are left behind effectively the defunct currency. And if you happen to be one of the unlucky ones, and who's the unlucky ones? The unlucky ones are the ones with a large amount of money, maybe millions, in a money market fund, or lots of bonds, or a bond fund, or who perhaps are members of are members of a pension fund which is invested in foreign assets. Those foreign assets, like a bond fund which is invested in US government or dollar-denominated assets and hedged back to your domestic currency, well, sorry, you've lost it, because they're not there's going to be no compensation for the US government's not going to compensate foreigners, and the British government's not going to compensate foreigners, and so forth. So those who've invested in overseas fiat assets will quite possibly find them untradeable or effectively worthless. So this is a scenario. It's not the only scenario, by the way. I just want to put it out there that there are some scenarios I foresee which may happen. And the reason I mentioned that one is it would be very beneficial to the government because it's a kind of debt jubilee where they start from zero, they can spend a lot of money. And of course, companies around the world which have borrowed money, all their bonds are left in the defunct currency. And what does that mean? It means they become much less burdened with debt, which means they can now build more factories, do more things because they're less burdened by a debt, or they have a debt, but it's now in a currency which is, to all intents, worthless. So it could be very beneficial for the world. So it is one of those things which will be considered, but it doesn't. I want to stress, I'm not saying this is the future. What I can tell you is the future. The future is this: if you own cash, money market funds, deposits, bonds, government bonds, or corporate bonds, you're likely to end up with something which is either worthless or worth a lot less, or has not got the buying power of what you'd get by being in other things. That, I think, is my message. And it could happen in multiple different ways, ranging from that CBDC taking over the old currency through to the bail-in. And of course, there are, or hyperinflation or other things. All these things are possibilities. We don't know which one's going to hit us, but we do know that the situation is almost unstoppable to go into a debt spiral at some point. We're getting very, very close to this debt spiral, which can come at the moment when confidence is suddenly lost. And you don't know when or how that happens, but these sort of things have happened in history, and it can come very, very quickly without warning. You just don't know what triggers it.